Welcome back, guys. I'm Zell, and if you remember, a few days ago, we took one of these apart and it was a big catastrophe whenever I tried to put it back together. You were better off if you watched the dogs. If you want to see that video, I'll link it up under the eye. It was, yeah, you might get a kick out of it. Anyhow, we're going to try this again. We have the same Delica, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take her all apart. This time, all I'm going to do to start with is take all the screws out of this side of the knife. The other side of the knife has the sleeves in it, so we don't need to do anything there. So I'm going to speed things up as I get all the screws out of here. Alright, be careful here. There's a little washer under the screw for the pivot. All those screws were T6 except for the pivot, which is a T8. Now we're going to lift this scale off. And here we are looking on the inside of the Delica again. We're a little smarter, I hope, this time. We'll find out. Get this guy apart. We're going to open it to get some of the tension off that spring. And we're going to stop right here. Before I go any further, we're going to put some tape on that blade, because this is going to be important. Mostly because I don't want to get cut. Alright. And we need to lift this thing off here, and it's, of course, not easy to get off. It's kind of set in there. Last time, if you remember, we used the pocket clip to kind of give it a little bit of a lift. I don't suggest you do that. I suggest you find a screwdriver or the proper tool at the very least. And see there, things are already coming apart on us. See what happens. You get the right tool and everything just works the way it's supposed to. Alright, we need to lift this out. We've already cleaned this guy up, but we'll look in again to see what we've got. We've got this little bushing, and these are paper thin little bushings. And we have another bushing here, and it's really thin, but it's really well put together on these little knives. And this is what we're going to do this time. We're going to leave that pin, we'll just take it out. And once we've got it out, we're going to to put it back together. And what you would do is, once you've got this part, you just clean this whole guy out. You can pull this piece of plastic here off if you need to, but really, unless you're just OCD about getting things clean, that does not need to come out. So I suggest you leave this in here and don't make this any more complicated than you have to. In fact, I'll show you another way to do this here in a minute once we get it back together from fully apart, where you can get the blade out, clean through the pivot without having to do all this. I personally think that method may be just a bit harder, but some of you may disagree. So now notice I pulled this pin out, little sleeve, and the lock bar is not in there. So what are we up to? Well, we're going to go ahead. We've wiped this thing out already last time. We're going to go ahead and basically put everything back together. We got our pivot screw with its little washer, and I don't have my Loctite gel today. It has taken a walk somewhere, and somebody probably borrowed it for some other project, so we're going to have to use some liquid Loctite, which I am not crazy about, but it'll work. And we're going to go ahead and put our pivot back in. And whenever you use that liquid stuff, be sure to wipe up any excess. That's one reason I don't care for the liquid stuff, is it tends to get everywhere. And we've still got quite a bit of Loctite on these, so we're not going to stick any more on there. These Delicas stay together pretty good, and you really should reapply the Loctite, but I don't use this knife all that much, so for the sake of time, we're just going to get it back together. Well, alright, we have this thing all back together, right? Well, no, we're missing the lock bar. So, how do we accomplish this next part? Well, I'm going to lay the lock bar in here, and this is why I taped the blade, because this is, it's not going to be as bad as I thought. We want to get this started on the back side with the lock bar laying in there with the blade open with the hook in the blade. And this is why we taped it, because what we're going to do is not that, because that failed. I have to try it again. Okay, how we're going to do this, we're going to lay this in there with the blade all the way open. Then we're going to stick our little sleeve in there, twirl it around, make sure you get it at a point where it'll go through, because it is D-shaped. There we go. Lay your lock bar in place. And here's why we got the blade tape, because you're going to have to get a hold of this guy and press down here. And there we go. It snapped into place. That's why you tape that blade, because I had to have my finger over there on it. And there we go. It's all in there. And then we put our little screw back in. Alright, that worked better than the last time. Do be sure that you get that blade taped off securely, so that if you choose to do this method that you don't cut yourself, because it would be very, very easy to cut yourself. Now, I told you I was going to show you another way to do it. The other way, and probably the smarter way, would be for me to go up to the shop and get a zip tie. Alright, I tried method number 2. Hell with that. We're not doing it. It was a bigger pain in the butt than trying to get this lock bar back in. So, face it guys, lockbacks are not fun to take apart. All we got left to do here is put the pocket clip back on, and we'll get that done if I get the right pocket clip. I've got 2 or 3 of them laying out here. And we want the black one on this one, because that's what it came with. And that should be it. That method, although it is not terribly safe, and you do need to realize that, I would put 2 or 3 layers of tape on your blade before even attempting that. But it did work better than anything I've seen so far. And now adjusting your Delica. And this goes for any of these lockbacks, and I've got it a little tight. Let's see, is it the pivot? Get the right. Pivot's not terribly tight, so that probably means it's this little screw right here. Goes to your lock bar, and yep, that one was really snug. Oh, or it could be the piece of tape that I left in it. There we go. Nope, it's still snug. And with all I did to it, I may have burred up one of them little bushings. Nope, there we go. whenever you adjust one of these, you have to deal with your pivot screw. Your pivot screw kind of sets your side-to-side movement. If you get it too tight, it affects your open and close. But this little screw right here affects how your lock bar works, and that lock bar rides against the back of the blade, the tang of the blade. So if it's too tight, then the action will be too tight. But there we go, we've got it all back. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the easiest method that I have seen so far. Now, it's definitely not the safest method, like I said, so if you're going to do that, be sure to tape that blade with a couple of layers of tape, and be sure to be aware of what you're doing. And really, guys, just be honest with you. If you don't have to take a lockback apart for some reason, don't do it. Most lockbacks come from the factory, especially something like a Spyderco, come from the factory in good shape. There's no real reason to take them apart. And that's kind of the whole deal with a lockback. You know, started with a buck 110, and you can't even take one of these guys apart, really. I mean, I suppose you could, but it'd be a lot of work to get one of them apart. So I suggest you just don't do it unless you need to. And if you need to, be very careful when you do it. Anyhow, guys, I really appreciate you hanging out with me and bumbling through this Delica once again. This time went a lot better. And you guys have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.